You're listening to the Coach's Journey podcast, exposing the struggles and celebrating the successes in the life of coaches who are action takers and creating authentic impact in today's world. Whether you're just starting out, expanding your reach, or exploding your impact, you're in the right place right now. Stay tuned and be sure to subscribe to this podcast. Now, here are your hosts of the Coach's Journey podcast.
Not just doing the external work, not just doing the work with your clients. You have to do the work with yourself, right? And the more we do that, I think that the better we become as coaches, you know. And here's the interesting thing is there's like almost like two truths to that. And I think it's good for people to like, I mean, this is my view of it, right? That there's like almost like, you know, sometimes there's two things that can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? Because, you know, once you become like really great at coaching, like you build your skills, I believe like you can coach anyone in any area of life and can help them transform if there's a connection and the client is like willing to do the work, right? Right. And, you know, so while I think that's really important, what you just shared, like we have to do the work. And, you know, interestingly enough, like most of the stuff that we do with clients, it's like a reflection. It's like, you know, I don't know who it was, but someone said this, right? That the things that your clients struggle the most with, like those are the things that you struggle with, right?
Those are the clients you attract as well, interestingly. Those are the kind of clients I attract all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, and I think, and at the same time, I think like the beautiful thing is like, just coming back to that skill parts, right? Develop those skills, because once you have those skills, you know, you can just, your finances can be maybe, you know, maybe you have 50,000 and in your bank account, you can coach multimillionaires and billionaires, right? Because they will have problems that you can help them with. Sometimes you could be going through a divorce and you could transform someone's relationship. And the reason I think we want to point it out is because what you were saying doesn't negate that, but I think like sometimes it's also good to slow down to that. It doesn't mean that you always have to have your stuff together.
Yeah.
Right? But it just means that you're taking ownership of it, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you're not, sooner or later, like it just comes to above the water.
Yeah. And that's why I meant with that is that you need to be battling it. Doesn't mean you need to be perfect in that area. We're, as human beings, we're all going to struggle in all of these areas that we're taking people through. And that's just understanding like how humans are in general. Like one of the areas I realized that because for the longest time, like looking at our parents, for example, it's very interesting for me, like the whole journey. Like I looked at my parents, they were like my heroes. Like they did everything. They did incredible things. They got us out of life-threatening situations, from poverty and everything to all the way to the Western world. And I had a really amazing view. And I still remember we were sitting around, it was a barbecue day we were having. And my older brother we were all talking about what do we appreciate about each other. And we're all saying that, I think it was my younger brother said that, oh, I appreciate this, but I don't like this about my parents. And then he tried to override that. He's like, no, our parents are perfect. I thought that was very inauthentic of him saying that. They're not perfect. They're human beings. And then I didn't say anything, but I really thought about this after a while. And I said, well, they were exactly like us, the way I'm struggling. They're struggled in all parts of their life. And when I started looking at them from that lens, I just looked at them like human beings. That actually improved my relationship so much more with them than trying to put them in this model that doesn't exist for us, like on this pedestal. And so it goes for everybody. When we look at millionaires or successful people, we kind of put them on a pedestal. And I think that's what it prevents us from supporting and serving them. It's like bringing them to the human level, because we all have the same challenges. But I think these points are really important, because before you even talk about business and marketing, if we're not on that journey of mastery, and this is kind of a self-reflection moment. If you're a coach listening to this, really ask yourself, what are you in this for? Because I've been in business for a little bit now. I've learned that there are easier ways to make money. Coaching is not the easiest way to make money. There are people that are making money much easier than
maybe we should talk about that.
If you're really after money, there are better ways. You can actually go and buy, and like some of my relatives are doing, I'm actually helping them think through some of this stuff. I'm like, because they're just interested in business. They're not really interested in the service the way we think about it. Like you can buy a laundromat. You can get, for example, like an older laundromat, and it doesn't have any technology. Some old person is running it. Their kids are not interested in it. And you can go drive around, find those people, and get a loan from the government for the most of it, and just improve the process, improve their systems, get technology and get better marketing and all that stuff. That it will take you a little bit of time, but it's actually a much easier process than building yourself up to that point where you can. And plus these businesses have a credibility. They've run for 10, 20, 30 years before you even showed up. Like that might be a much easier way to build a business if you're building a business, but really doing a self-reflection. What are you in this for? Is it just business? Because if that's the only motivation you have, especially for coaches, I don't think it's the kind of profession for you. It's a lot like doctors going into a healing path just for the sake of money, but they don't care to heal people. That to me is a huge, what do we call it? It's an ethical dilemma. So there's an ethical challenge here, is that what are you going into this for? Is it really to serve people, support people? Yeah, in the process, you're going to build a business, everything, but that needs to be the primary motivation. And then the mastery and the skill sets, everything is around it. And that requires a lot of honesty.
I agree. And I think like the truth is, I think the process will filter you out if you're about the money. Like, because I think even with doctors, right? Like if you're just about money, you're not going to survive the 6 years of the medical degree, right? I think with coaching, that's happened to me. Like, I'll be honest, by the way, like, here's the thing. Sometimes it's okay, I think, to start with that. Like for me, it's about, making enough money that would support the family. And my wife lost her job at the beginning of my coaching career because she was pregnant. So I knew, okay, now I need to replace 2 jobs and there's a baby coming, right? So it's just like a lot of pressure to make money. But here's the thing, right? When I shifted my focus, and I think that for me, this happened probably at the end of the second year or like halfway the second year, I shifted my focus from like money to mastery. And I thought, you know what? Even if it takes me 10 years, if I just focus on becoming really good, I'll become successful in this. And here's the beautiful thing, right? When I took my focus off money and I just focused on the process, I started making a lot more money. And it is because the money is a byproduct, right? It's a byproduct of how well you're doing, how many people you're helping, right? How impactful your work is. That professional service, when that professional service becomes better and you're doing it more often, right? You start seeing that more people start saying yes.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it comes down to like, and I struggled through this, a very similar process. Funny how our realizations are similar. So I struggled initially when I jumped into the thing. I was driving Uber at the time. And like, I had to battle between running the business and driving Uber and providing for my family constantly. And I didn't know how the business part would run. And one of my biggest realizations came in when I got a criticism from one of my family members. Like, you've been in this for a while. You're not making any money. You left your engineering career. This, that, and the other. It was very hurtful. But when I sat and reflected on that, I'm like, you know what? This matters to me. I will never not provide for my family, but this is connected to my soul. This is connected to who I am deep down. I don't care if it takes me 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, I'm doing this. And that's exactly how I responded to the family members. I'm like, this is who I am. And that truly matters to me. And I want to kind of take a step back and talk a little bit about the industry, because a few of my clients over the past few years have come from coaching experiences that were not very good. And when I say not very good, they were scared to go in a coaching relationship. They were open to it. They knew that because they had read so many books, they knew that coaching is can be a very powerful path. For example, one of my clients, I was in Europe at the time. He reached out to me because he heard me on a podcast. I was in Sweden at the time. He booked a call with me. I was partially working. It was my sister's place. Partially, I was off too. So I was only working, I think, 3 days there. And he reached out to me. We started out and I could tell he was really anxious. I'm like, tell me a little bit about, like, why do you want to do this? And he was very upfront. He said, I'll be honest with you. I work with a coach and he worked with me for a little bit. He promised that he would do this, that, and the other, but nothing happened. And we asked for our money back. He never did that in the process. And I don't know what happened on the coach's side, but at least from his perspective, he was very disappointed with the process. Now, obviously, there will be people will not feel like they're getting the results. That's fine. But I could tell that there was a lack of integrity there on the other side. And to the point where we did the session, he got a lot out of it. He's like, holy shoot, this is coaching? His response was like, this is coaching. He's like, I did not go through coaching. Like, okay. He still had to invite his wife to the call because she went through this process with him. And she interviewed me too. And then when I talked to her, then they did the go ahead. At this point, to this day, I think it's been 2.5 years. I'm still coaching both of them, the wife and the husband. I'm actually meeting them in person soon too. And also recently, like I just had a client who finished after a year. And one of the things that I heard that was really heartwarming for me was that she's like, you changed my perception of coaching. Like the last time I went through coaching, it's like, I ain't telling anybody about this shit. That's how she talks. This time is like, I'm really gonna recommend, because ultimately it's like we need to think about the industry as well, because it is a very new industry. People don't realize this has not been standardized. It's a lot like Uber when nobody knew about Uber. And they were just making money before the government stepped into it. It was a lot like psychology before psychology became known, but it's a very new, everybody's calling themselves a coach, but they don't actually know. And even some of the coaches who are making money, sometimes I hear it. I'm like, how are you working with these clients? And I don't know how they've gone about it, but understanding that this impacts us all. Like it impacts our clients, it spreads the message of coaching. And part of what I want to do with the podcast is really get people to understand that this is not just about me, you, it's about the whole industry, about serving and the ripple effect of that in the world. Because I truly believe that coaches have a very important part to play in this whole scheme of things around leadership, around self-awareness, around spirituality, around getting people to become aware. And it could be a really big thing if you really think about it. At least I have. So think of it from that perspective, because you're giving the industry a name every time you're in a session as well.
Yeah.
I don't know what your thoughts are about that, but I feel deeply about this part.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about that. I think, and by the way, like I think I haven't tried it, but like Uber could be also another great way to pick up clients.
It was funny. So you know what made me realize I used to do coaching sessions during my Uber rides, but they didn't know. So the two things that helped me was, again, Richard Liv and Steve Chalmer. I never asked permission to coach somebody. That was one problem. Second, I never offered. I never gave a proposal. I just hoped that they would kind of reach out to me. I would give them my contact information, but I would never really tell them that I was a coach.
Look, there's a few things, right? And I think even some coaches have good intentions. They set the wrong idea. Like I'm not gonna mention names because some of them are well known, but basically when I was like starting out the coaching journey, I would ask like, so one of the things I did early on, right? And this was like kind of selfish, and at the same time, I knew it would help people. But at the start of my coaching journey, I started interviewing coaches that I thought were doing well, right? Sometimes people would say no to me because they didn't know me, but other people, they were just saying yes, right? So I started interviewing different people, but some of them were not coaches, entrepreneurs, but a lot of them were coaches. And here's the thing, like the funny thing is I remember a lot of them saying like, oh, no, you don't need a certification, right? And I think it's not just about certification. I think it's more about training, right? But I think like, unfortunately, I see a lot of people say that, like even coaches that are doing really well. And I think, it creates this misunderstanding, I think, to new coaches, right? That, oh, I don't need certification. So my thing is like, right, I think, yes, hell yes, like you need a certification, right? In fact, like, most certification are 6 months. There's some that are 1 year. There's some like where you can go deeper. It's like 18 months, right? Where you can have multiple layers. Like if you think about it, like we talked about doctors and dentists, right? Like dentists study for 4 years, doctors 6 years, and that's just like your foundation.
Yeah.
As a coach, a certification is just the basic foundation. If you go through a good certification program, because I've helped a lot of coaches that, for example, don't have a certification and they would like struggle in their business, like building their business. And I've coached coaches, right, and mentored them that have done certain certification programs and their business grows a lot faster because they have that, because a lot of the things we talked about, right, in a good coaching school, you're not just learning the theory, you're putting it into practice, you're getting feedback from the facilitator, you're getting feedback from other coaches. So a lot of that is set up at the beginning, like you're doing those 40 hours. And so that's really crucial. In fact, like I would go a step further and say, like, if someone is really serious about building a profession, like becoming a professional coach with a good practice, earning good money, you should probably go like for ICF. ICF has like 3 levels, right? Like I think it's like ACC, PCC, MCC. But the thing is, like, if you go for PCC, and you don't just get that qualification, you have to prove to them that you're good at coaching. you have to send them at least 2 recordings, right?
Right.
So at a very like basic level, certification, and there's lots of good ones out there. And then the second level, I would say, like, if you're really serious, you probably should do ICF. And I don't have any affiliations with them, but I think like that's really important. And then the other thing is, I think, is expectations. I learned this also the hard way. Look, you can be a great coach and the client can have completely different expectations. One of my mentors told me this. He said, like, E equals E. Expectations equals experience. So if you're not clear about what the expectations are of the client, and that's why I think, like, personally, making it really simple, asking the client, what do you want? What would make our work really successful at the end of these 3 months, at the end of these 6 months coaching agreement? What do you want to achieve? Just slowing down, right? Like, how does that look like? And, it's not in our control, but it's just getting really clear. And then also setting up some clear agreements, which is often uncomfortable for new coaches, but setting them really clear agreements from the start. If people are not have an audio I can share with your community, you can, share it in your Facebook group. And, if people want it from the podcast, they just need to join your Facebook group. You can put it there. But there's a great audio, that Steve recorded. It's called Expectations versus Agreements, right? In fact, I learned this from a lot of experienced coaches like Rich and Steve. Like, what they do is they spend often 2 hours with people just discussing agreements at the beginning of a coaching agreement. And, so when someone has paid you the first session, you want to slow down and talk about agreements.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you don't do that, like, you might give the client, for example, some homework, or you might ask them to do some things and they don't do it. So we can set up agreements very clearly. And again, agreements are co-created, right? It's not just agreements. Agreements are not just rules like, okay, you need to be on time, cancellation policy. There's a lot more around how do we get the most out of this experience. In fact, that's actually...
You're listening to the Coach's Journey podcast.